So we're talking about pillows today and turning anything you want into a pillow. So I'm not giving you measurements or anything like that. I'm just showing you how I make my own pillows. What you want to do is you want to measure your block. Even if your pattern says that your block should be, 12.5 inches, I still want to measure it because you never know. You could be a little off, the pattern could be a little wrong. You just don't know what's going on. So I always measure my block and I write that number down, and then I add 4 inches, and that is what I cut my back and my batting to. The back, this is actually going to be inside your pillow, so it doesn't matter what fabric you use. So I always try to find a fabric that I don't want or that I think is ugly or I'm just not into anymore. In this case, this is a piece of muslin that I dyed for whatever reason, and it's just been laying around the studio. I've made the backing and batting 4 inches or thereabouts bigger than my block. Then I basted it. I always spray baste, or you can pin baste, whatever you want, and then of course you've quilted your block. So now what you want to do is you want to square it up. We're going to trim off these edges and get it nice and cleaned up. Right, so I have trimmed this up, made it all nice and clean. You want to measure this right here. So this is the height, and you want to cut a piece of fabric, whatever this measurement is. You can put this aside. So you cut that strip out, and then you want to cut 2 pieces from that strip. Both pieces measure, the height of your block, and then one of them will measure the width minus 3 inches, and one of them will measure 12 inches. We're going to turn these pieces to the height, and then you're just going to eyeball a 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be exactly a 1/4 inch, just pretty close to it. I'm going to do that one more time. So we're going to do the same edge. Just for reference, this is the wrong side and this is the right side. I'm going to do the same thing for this other piece. So now I'm going to take these to my sewing machine and I'm going to go and sew right along this fold or right beside the fold. Okay, so that's what that looked like. For some reason, my tension is always not quite right on these, so I always like to give them a little press. So now we're going to layer our block, our quilted block. We're going to layer it face up, and you do want to make sure that you pick the one that's the widest. And we're going to just put it along the edges, making sure everything is flush and fits nicely, and that these are face down, so the right side is down. We're going to do that for the shorter one too. And mainly I'm just going along the edges and making sure that everything lines up well. I like to put a pin where these are so that they won't, shift when you start sewing. I'm going to put a pin there, and then I'm going to put a pin where this one is, right here, and then right here. And now I'm just going to go along and pin all these edges up. I'm going to pick a corner and I'm going to start sewing a 1/4 inch. Now you do want to keep it a 1/4 inch because remember this block, it has that, and I don't want to lose that point. So I do want to definitely sew a 1/4 inch. That's what this zigzag method is best for. So let's go and sew that up. Sewing a 1/4 inch on a pillow is not ideal. Ideally, I would have done it more like, at a 1/2 inch. But because this block had those points and I don't want to lose them, I'm stuck doing it at a 1/4 inch. So most of the times we would put a border around it, but on this case I didn't. So what I do want to do is just run my hand through here and then just check that these 2 layers right here don't have, the hole, or I missed the stitch or something like that. The bad thing would be if one of these was off and it was hanging out, and then I went ahead and did my serging stitch and then it was out, then I'd have to undo all those stitches and then I'd be very upset. So better to check it now than later. So now we just want to take this little corner right here and we're just going to cut this off. These are going to make our corners pop out a little bit better. So I'm going to do that on all 4 of the corners, and you make sure you don't cut your stitching. So now we're going to serge the edges, and I don't have a serger, and maybe you don't either. If you have a serger, you definitely want to serge, not what I'm doing. But if you don't have a serger and you still want nice serged, clean edges, we just do this with a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and show you how to do that. All right, so make sure that you have got your zigzag foot on your machine. You've got your machine set to a zigzag stitch, and you've also not changed the height of the stitches. You want that to stay the same, but you do want to make the width as wide as your machine will go. And we're going to get started. So we're going to do a few back stitches, and then we're going to go. And I don't know if you can see it from the angle you're at, but my needle is coming off of this edge. It's just falling right off of it. Just like this. I'm trying to get the needle as close to this line as I can get, and then when the needle falls on this side, it falls off. And that is the result. I'm gonna finish this up, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So at a corner, we just kind of pivot where we cut it at, and then pivot again for the other side. Okay, so here is what that edge ends up looking like. If I had used thicker thread, it would probably have been a little bit better serge, but the idea is it doesn't fray when you wash it, so that's what it does. Now we will just turn our pillow inside out, and we're just gonna push out these corners best we can, and that is what the pillow looks like done. So you've got this nice, clean, finished edge, and all we need to do now is stuff it. In the blog post that you're reading this video at, it talked about making your own pillow forms, and that is what I did with this one. This is just an old piece of fabric that I ended up having to sew it together because I didn't have a fabric big enough, but it's just an old piece of fabric that would have ended up being tossed or whatever, and I have made it into a pillow. And you can see where I sewed this closing seam, but it is inside of this pillow is nothing but fabric bits, not your scraps, but just bits that you can't use, kind of like this. This is just things that are unusable, and that is what I've stuffed these pillows with. So, and it worked. It's a little bit heavier than a normal pillow. It's a little bit lumpy. It's definitely not for comfort, but you can feel good about repurposing and reusing and not wasting. So let's get this stuffed. Here is our pillow. You can see it has an envelope back, all nice and neat. So there you go.